Story 1. A coworker brought a homemade dessert pizza topped with yogurt and fruit. This woman was often unwell, frequently coughing and sneezing. She mentioned that her two toddlers helped make it, and it looked like little fingers had spread the yogurt. Although I love kids, this grossed me out more than anything else. It was the only dish that nobody touched, and she was quite upset about it. Story 2. A meat and vegetable stew had so much long, thick black hair in it that if you had told me some lady emptied her hairbrush into the pot, I would have believed it. I will go to my friends' houses for parties, but I will never brave a potluck again. People can be unpleasant. Story 3. Once a girl brought some unidentifiable yellow substance. We asked her what it was, and she did not know. We simply put it aside. Story 4. I know a woman who brought something that was supposed to be like pulled chicken. You cook chicken, debone it, and place the shreds of meat on a bun. It's easy. Instead, she cooked a whole chicken and put the entire thing in a blender, bones and all, then brought that to a family reunion. Story 5. I went to a potluck once. Somebody walked in and put an unopened can of creamed corn on the table and walked away. I was surprised. Did you bring a bowl, a spoon, or even a can opener? Story 6. Someone once brought microwave chicken nuggets to a potluck that were so bad the kids didn't even want them. Story 7. I went to a gathering a few months ago where someone was very proud of their dish. It was tuna noodle casserole, but they ran out of milk and used marshmallow fluff instead. I can't believe I even tried it. Story 8. Not the worst, but certainly the most mislabeled. A bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken with a sign in front saying, lasagna. Everyone at the party deliberately called it lasagna all evening. What happened was the couple had committed to bringing lasagna to the party. On the way out the door, the person carrying the lasagna slipped on the ice. The lasagna hit the pavement, destroying itself and the casserole dish it was in. Since they were already running late and didn't want to show up empty-handed, they visited a Kentucky Fried Chicken on the way over. Story 9. I was invited to a potluck once and came across a man and his young daughter with their casserole. It was half filled, but the walls of the dish were covered in burnt residue. Beans, perhaps? The casserole was topped with several flavors of Doritos. The child, who clearly had a cold due to the dried mucus on her face, proudly exclaimed, I helped make the dish and crush the chips all by myself. I hate that I forgot this other detail. While the dad was enthusiastically serving their culinary creation onto everyone's plates, either wanting to take home an empty dish or evenly distribute the food, his little girl built a mound of Doritos in front of her, picking them off the casserole. I noticed just how dirty her hands and fingernails were. Story 10. A bowl of unseasoned boiled potatoes resembled someone who gave up halfway through making mashed potatoes. Story 11. A man brought chicken adobo. My wife and I gave him a ride home after work. He invited us in to see his apartment. On the stove was a pot of chicken adobo. He kept it on the stove at room temperature and would heat it up each time he ate some. That was what he brought to the potluck. I have no idea how long it sat there. After that, I never eat anything at a potluck. It's more like hoping for good luck. Story 12. My former sister-in-law was a cheapskate who always showed up with a bag of potato chips and a trunk full of empty containers to collect all the leftovers at every family function. When my wife, her sister, died, I caught her taking items from her jewelry box. Story 13. These comments made me realize that I will be eating before I go to the next potluck. Thank you very much. Story 14. It was not a potluck, but a tailgate. The guy brought a package of 8 slices of cheese for burgers. There were only 5 slices left in the open package. He brought 5/8 of a package of cheese. Story 15. German potato salad for an ethnic-themed potluck at work involved a group of graduate school teaching assistants with limited kitchen space and experience. One member misread the recipe and added 4 cups of vinegar instead of a 1/4 cup. She then added some extra mustard because she liked the taste. After mixing everything, she sealed it in an airtight container and let it sit. The next day, she was excited to share and rushed to the room where we were eating. Upon opening the container, the overpowering stench hit her. She dropped the container, and a noxious yellow ooze covered the table and dripped onto the floor. Before she could warn anyone that she had created a toxin similar to mustard gas, 2 more people entered the room and promptly became ill. By the time it was all over, the university had to close that section of the floor for deep cleaning for 48 hours. Fortunately, it was our preparation week, and there weren't any students present. I swear we could still smell it a year later when they finally ripped up the carpet. Story 16. Lime jello with mayonnaise on top. It's disappointing when you're expecting a bite of jello and whipped cream. Story 17. We had a work potluck, and this person brought in his leftover pizza from the night before. It was half-eaten and cold. Story 18. Ramen noodle salad is prepared using uncooked noodles. The noodles are smashed and mixed with mayonnaise, celery, and onions. Then the flavoring packet is sprinkled on top. It is as unappetizing as it sounds. Story 19. A car. A coworker was suspected of stealing items. Before this, we had a great work environment. Her inappropriate emails and the disappearance of items certainly changed that, but no one could catch her. We had a huge celebration for some milestones. We were given 2 hours to eat and play games set up by the company with prizes, and it was paid time too. They really went overboard, and it was lovely. They provided several food options because they had a limited budget, and after voting, 90% chose to have a potluck. Since we were nighttime workers, we were used to bringing in food and had plenty of fridge space and room to eat, which allowed for more and better prizes. A couple of people who had issues with this were given permission to leave and use their 2 hours as they wished. People got really excited, and we planned a great feast that, miraculously, accommodated all food allergies and dietary preferences. Everyone was happy, and I had never seen something so complicated come together so well. Even the office bullies were getting into it and not causing problems. The night of the celebration, we had an absolute blast. Everyone grabbed a plate, quickly ate 1 round, then headed outside to play games. The competition was friendly. No one was upset or complaining, and even sworn enemies were working together. Everything was going great until someone went back inside to grab water and returned running to get a manager. And soon everything was shut down. This coworker mentioned earlier doesn't drive. She doesn't have a license or a car and lives about 3 blocks from the company. We know this because she begs for rides on bad weather days, which no one provides for various reasons due to her attitude problems. Someone saw her get out of a car and kindly asked if she received one, but the coworker brushed them off and went inside. During the festivities, someone caught her carrying a case of water out to her car through a side door. Keep in mind, the company had provided a ton of drinks meant to be kept in the kitchen and used over the next week. They also provided a variety of boxed and bagged sides. You can guess that all of that was in her car. Drinks and snacks for 100 people for a week. Let us not forget what she did to the potluck. The place was a mess. In her hurry to grab what she wanted, she ruined the rest. Items were on the floor, containers destroyed, and everything was cross-contaminated because it seemed her plan was to grab a random container, dump it out, then fill it with bits of various dishes to create a meal she wanted and keep doing that. I guess that was her idea, but she didn't even complete it. No one could get a second helping or take their own leftovers home. Again, this was for around 100 people, so you can imagine how much food she ruined and the chaos she created. Yes, the missing containers were also in her car. Turns out she had a friend rent a car specifically for this. Needless to say, people were outraged. The company reimbursed those who truly had their containers ruined and gave us all about $50 to cover food and snacks. She was given several chances to explain herself, and I assume they were hoping for some sort of excuse involving poverty, though she lived in a modest apartment, had no kids, and was in a well-paying job or drug use or something they could use as an explanation. But no, she just kept insisting the food was free, and claimed there was no reason she shouldn't take what she wanted. There was no remorse whatsoever, except for a bit of regret shown when she got fired. They suspended her and brought her in for 2 meetings with her immediate manager, then the site manager. In the 3rd meeting, they fired her. I only know for sure because my desk was on the opposite wall from hers, and I heard her pleading with the manager supervising her desk cleanup. Story 20. Not necessarily the dish itself, but after observing the hygiene habits of my coworkers, Pretty much anything brought in is questionable. If you were not ashamed to leave the restroom without pretending to wash your hands or spend half the day at your desk with your hand up your nose, I can only imagine how clean your utensils and bowls must be. Story 21. It was our Christmas party. A couple brought 2 turkey legs and 3 slices of turkey. No one touched it. Story 22. A man brought a package of raw bacon and was confused about why none of the women would cook it for him. He also refused to cook it because everyone is always so happy that he brings bacon. Story 23. A guy from India brought in a $2 jar of pickled vegetables from an Indian store. No one touched it. I asked him why, and he said he knew no one would touch it so he could take it home. It was ethnic enough that it seemed like he put effort into representing his homeland, which no one could dispute, and no one would know how much it cost because it was too exotic. Story 24. A s'mores dessert made with marshmallow fluff sounds delicious. However, it was brought to a potluck where a 5-year-old who is allergic to eggs ate it and violently threw up. I brought the dessert, and I am also the child's parent. I didn't know there were eggs in marshmallow fluff, which made it my biggest mom fail ever. Story 25. This reminds me of a job I had a long time ago. The place was closing down because the company was moving operations to a different country for cheaper labor. The demand to meet a quota was gone, and we were having a potluck lunch about twice a week. Every other person was bringing in some kind of casserole to share with their coworkers. Most of them were terrible. A friend and I made it our duty to try every one so that we could separate the casseroles from the ones that were not good. Story 26. A manager not only brought but also prepared broccoli and cauliflower in a crock pot for a work party. The whole office smelled unpleasant. Sadly, this wasn't a joke on us. It is one of his favorite side dishes. Story 27. I worked in a very populated office with about 125 people. A woman I worked with brought a box of Little Debbie brownies. While I'm not saying she needed to provide dessert for everyone, it felt somewhat insulting. However, she usually brought nothing and made plates for herself and her son to take home for dinner. Another woman brought small quiches, but I don't think she cooked them, as they tasted like raw egg and onions. Story 28. We asked people to bring picnic food for our barbecue, and they brought lentil soup. However, they did not bring any bowls or spoons, just a pot of soup for the barbecue. Story 29. Cooked cabbage and gelatin was made by an elder in the family. Someone took a bite and then violently vomited. I took a bite out of curiosity. Story 30. Courgette cupcakes were truly horrific. I stood by and watched people approach, pick up a cupcake, bite into it, grimace, and then quickly turn around to spit it into a napkin. It was quite a fun party game. Story 31. A former colleague of mine, who always had dirty, greasy hair, brought fudge to a Thanksgiving potluck and encouraged everyone to try it. My supervisor mentioned that he had never seen the guy wash his hands. Fortunately, I was diabetic and vegetarian at the time, now I am vegan. So I lied and told him I was vegan. Story 32. My friend's potato salad was basically just potatoes with vinegar. After I had a few drinks, I asked her what she meant. She replied, I don't like crunchy things in my potatoes. Story 33. My parents were Catholic, and they hosted potlucks for special events. The food smelled and tasted like it came from old people's homes. Story 34. Squirrel and swamp cabbage made from Florida cabbage palms. Created by a man who is coincidentally the only person I have ever met who thoroughly enjoyed visiting Vietnam. Story 35. Not a potluck picnic, but an after-funeral gathering. All the dishes were half empty except for one large bowl of cold macaroni salad, which hadn't been touched. I love anything with pasta, so I took a big helping of it. I had no idea how it was made, but it was terrible. It had the weirdest taste, and apparently everyone else knew not to eat it, which is why it remained untouched. I was from out of state and had no idea this was the worst macaroni salad in the world. Story 36. At a work potluck, a man came in with a can of green beans, poured it into a bowl, juice and all, and left it to be served ice cold. Story 37. Twice baked mashed potatoes with whole green olives. I was at a family cookout and spit it out, yelling, Who puts olives in mashed potatoes? My dad was so embarrassed. Story 38. Spaghetti soup. Or at least we thought that's what it was. It turned out it was supposed to be regular spaghetti. The woman didn't drain the grease from the hamburger, she browned for the meat in the sauce and just added the sauce. Everyone who ate it got sick. Story 39. Mutton, just the meat, no juice, no gravy, and no accompanying vegetables. Just a huge, dry piece of sheep meat. Story 40. My aunt was known for being unsanitary and using her bare hands to mix food for parties. My mom found a fingernail once, and that was about 20 years ago. I won't eat food that her kids make. Story 41. We had a potluck several weeks ago, and someone brought Doritos. People began eating them and complained that they tasted like dirt. We checked the bag and noticed it had a promotion for Mockingjay Part 1. The chips had expired in 2014. This was a mixed department potluck, and we haven't identified the person who brought the 9-year-old chips. Story 42. My Midwestern aunt brought ambrosia made with spaghetti for dessert. To clarify, that is overcooked pasta, marshmallows, coconut cream, and canned fruit. Story 43. Potato salad. I love potato salad, but this had big chunks of potatoes that were barely cooked and tossed in a small amount of Thousand Island dressing, and that was it. There was no onion, celery, or anything like that. I tried it to confirm it tasted as disgusting as it looked. Story 44. I met a girl who wanted to be friends, so I invited her to a potluck. She arrived hours late with a beautiful silver bowl full of raisins. She apologized for her tardiness, explaining that she had to polish the silver bowl first. Story 45. We used to have ethnically themed potlucks, such as German, Italian, Chinese, and Mexican. A coworker would always bring the same dish, little smoky sausages in a crock pot. We complained about his lack of originality, so he simply changed the sauces for the little smokies. Story 46. Some kind of marshmallow-covered fudge dessert looked pretty good until you noticed it was full of cat hair. Story 47. Someone once brought 2 bags of marshmallows to a work potluck lunch. Nothing else. Story 48. I was exploring different faiths and was invited to a Mormon church for a potluck. They were excited to show me the Mexican food they prepared. However, they somehow managed to ruin quesadillas. That's when I knew the Lord was not with them. Story 49. A girl brought a family-sized bag of Lay's chips to our cultural dish potluck that represented our country, the United States, while studying abroad. Story 50. At my work potluck, I saw someone bring bagels and cream cheese. I am always skeptical about potlucks, so I checked the bottom of the cream cheese for an expiration date, and it had expired many months ago. Story 51. Fish curry. The secret ingredient was not curry powder or any other spices. It was simply butternut squash and assorted fish simmered in coconut cream and water. I can still taste it. Story 52. African fish and vegetable dish. I brought it, but it was truly horrible. Now I taste test before I bring a new dish. Story 53. I don't remember ever having bad food at a potluck or reunion, but I'm from South Carolina, known as the diabetic capital of the Southeast. Story 54. The cheesecake had no sugar at all. The filling was still liquid and tasted like cheese. The crust was burnt and tasted salty. It was absolutely terrible. Story 55. A woman made crab dip, but she used a lemon pepper tuna packet instead of crab. It was unappetizing. Story 56. I was going to post about my coworker who is a single dad and not much of a cook. His contribution was always a couple of Costco pizzas, but after seeing the other comments, I don't think his even compares. Story 57. A friend brought a sugar-free, gluten-free homemade dessert to a potluck I attended. I do not want to challenge anyone's food choices, but it had a cardboard texture with a vague taste of blueberries and an unpleasant aftertaste. I cannot imagine eating that regularly. Story 58. A pumpkin cream pie. It was at a Friendsgiving, and I only tried it because I heard how bad it was. I am known in my friend group as the baker, and when I asked the person who brought it where she got the recipe, she yelled across the room to her significant other, "See, she wants the recipe, so it must be good." I told her that I was only asking so I didn't accidentally make the same recipe. The closest thing I could think of to compare it to would be if you threw up a little after eating pumpkin pie and vanilla ice cream. Not bad for vomit, but pretty bad for food. Story 59. Family reunion after my grandfather passed away. He was a fabulous cook who would check and double-check all the food and question the people who brought it. He had incredibly high standards. Back to the story now. At this family reunion, my uncle and cousins brought deviled eggs. Since no one, particularly my uncle, would respect anyone questioning how they were made or who prepared them, the family just allowed him to put them out with all the other food. My teenage female cousin came in and gleefully popped a deviled egg in her mouth. I caught a glimpse of her filthy hands and the black stuff under her nails. I was disgusted and horrified. I gently suggested we all wash our hands before eating for sanitary purposes. But this same cousin loudly declared that she didn't need to wash her hands to eat the eggs, and that she hadn't washed her hands to make them in the first place. My mouth dropped, and everyone who hadn't already eaten the deviled eggs on their plates threw them away. Every single person who ate a deviled egg ended up with food poisoning. Every single one. This cousin later got a job at a fast food restaurant and was shocked they forced her to wash her hands all the time because, as she put it, "I'm clean so germs don't get on me. No more family reunion potlucks. We all pitch in and order barbecue or something else now." Story 60. It's a toss-up between the single-serving chili in a crock-pot with uncooked hamburger meat or the woman who mixed in the salad dressing, paused to taste from the mixing spoon, added more dressing, and repeated until it tasted right. Then she served it using that same mixing spoon. I don't eat potlucks. Story 61. A noodle casserole that used everything from a random person's fridge, as they had been there the night before. Ingredients included tuna, pineapple, peas, and salsa. It was gray, and there was cigarette ash on top. Story 62. Some really bad deviled eggs. My coworker is a good friend and is great at cooking, but that one time they just did not taste right. I mean, it's eggs. It's kind of hard for them to sit well overnight. I don't judge her. I just think this is not a good dish to bring to a work picnic potluck. Maybe it's an unpopular opinion. Also, I shouldn't talk since I'm just the guy who buys a cheese and cracker platter and calls it a day. Story 63. Someone brought 24 soft-boiled eggs to a work picnic during a hike. Since no one had any cutlery, it was a mess. Story 64. Chocolate dirt cake was served in a litter box. It was a new litter box, and supposedly the cake was good, but the presentation was unappetizing. Story 65. Lay's French onion dip is the only contribution this woman, who is 31 years old, makes to our group gatherings. She never hosts or cooks anything. She just brings a cheap jar of chip dip. Despite being a lawyer and having plenty of money and resources, she consistently chooses to bring only this dip. Story 66. We were hired to photograph a company potluck at a farm. Everyone attending was a farmer. We were city folk, so we imagined that the food would be real comfort food, homemade traditional recipes. It was not. Every family brought their own version of Jell-O salad. There was Jell-O salad with lettuce and vegetables, Jell-O salad with corn and tortilla chips. There was a Jell-O salad version of every side dish you can think of, and they all included whipped topping mixed in as well. It was an ocean of Jell-O salads. There was nothing else to eat, so by the time you put a spoonful of this and that on your plate, you ended up with a pile of Jell-O mush. We were hungry, so we ate it. It was a 1-hour drive to the farm, but a 3-hour drive home because we had to stop every 20 minutes or so for another round of diarrhea. To this day, I can't eat Jell-O. Story 67. Ham biscuits dusted with flour turned out to be dry skin from the cook's head, as she washed her permed hair with dish soap every day, causing severe itching. She constantly scratched her head with a pencil, leaving a trail of white powder wherever she went. As the receptionist, the front desk was always covered in this powder. Story 68. My good friend Chad always brings sliced cucumbers. They are not peeled or diced, and not even the English variety, but the inexpensive ones from the 2-for-1 section. I'm surprised he takes the time to slice them. Story 69. One Thanksgiving, my sister-in-law was in charge of the mashed potatoes. She brought mashed cauliflower and didn't tell anyone because she claimed, You can't even tell. It tastes just like mashed potatoes. She's one of those people who feels the need to healthify everything. There is a time and place for cauliflower, but it doesn't belong in my mashed potatoes. She is no longer allowed to bring mashed potatoes. Story 70. Another instance occurred at work where food was provided for employees during an occasion, specifically a baked potato bar. The baked potatoes were wrapped in foil for cooking and left in the foil all day. At the end of the day, they were placed in the refrigerator, remaining in the foil for approximately 12 hours. The issue of potatoes not cooling properly is often the cause of illness from homemade potato salad, rather than the mayonnaise. The following day, employees consumed the potatoes and subsequently experienced severe illness lasting several days. Once again, unless you are obtaining food from a restaurant that adheres to safety guidelines, it is advisable to avoid workplace buffets. Story 71. Citrus salad. I was looking forward to enjoying the pieces of orange and grapefruit with the little crumbles the cook had added. I took a big bite and it turned out to be blue cheese. I had no idea that was a combination. Some people may find it delicious, but even if I liked blue cheese, the unexpected surprise of that tangy bitterness ruined it for me. Story 72. I cannot eat at potlucks. I worry about the cleanliness of the kitchen where the food was prepared and how it was handled. Ironically, if someone brings Kentucky Fried Chicken, which is very unhealthy, I will eat it because it came from a commercial kitchen. I realize that I am not being logical, but I have to be myself. This all started when I was a child. At family potlucks, I knew the people and their kitchen hygiene. Story 73. Rice Krispie treats filled with peanut butter looked like normal Rice Krispie treats. So a child who was severely allergic to peanuts unknowingly ate one and had to go to the hospital. Label your food with allergens. Story 74. Some kind of baked casserole with canned pineapples, cheese, and crackers. The lady who made it was a sweetheart and my mentor. She brought me some in a little bowl and excitedly waited for me to try it. Honestly, it wasn't bad, but it was still one of the weirdest things I've ever seen someone bring for others to eat. Story 75. Someone brought chicken and waffles to an office potluck. The chicken used was spicy Tyson nuggets served on mini cinnamon waffles at room temperature. Story 76. I have only been to one potluck, and everything was decent. However, only one other person and I brought a homemade dish. Everyone else just brought store-bought items. I spent my morning making delicious bacon and jalapeno baked macaroni and cheese, while someone else brought a bag of chips. My main point is to encourage more people to contribute homemade dishes. Story 77. I worked for a city hall in Japan and was asked to come up with ideas for fun international events to hold with the community. I suggested a potluck. An awkward silence fell over the room. Apparently, potlucks of any kind had been unofficially banned from city-sponsored events because, a couple of decades prior, someone had brought arsenic-laced curry to one, resulting in the deaths of 4 people. I didn't actually see it, but that is probably the worst potluck food I have ever heard of. Story 78. Actually, it was not the food itself that was the problem, as it all looked delicious and unlikely to cause harm. The issue was that the first person in line for the food table was a colleague known for her poor personal hygiene, who had already received written warnings. She had such a strong odor that it was noticeable upon entering the lobby 3 floors below our office. Several colleagues felt ill after spending time in the same room as her, and she was eventually terminated due to her hygiene issues. She was at the front of the line, helping herself to every dish and using her hands, which often had unsightly debris under her nails. Nearly everyone present suddenly decided they were no longer very hungry and returned to their seats. I was included in that decision. I stopped by a chip shop on my way home instead. Story 79. I brought some fried chicken and a store-bought pie. I made a big deal about apologizing for not cooking the dessert and that I am only good at frying. Everyone joined in on teasing me for bringing the only non-homemade item. It was all good fun because everyone complimented how delicious and amazing my fried chicken was. An actual quote was, "This might be the best fried chicken I've ever had." So it all balances out, right? No, I bought the fried chicken too. But I also bought the pie as a misdirect so no one would question that I didn't cook the chicken. Fools, eat it up. Enjoy my lies as I become the fried chicken god in your eyes. Story 80. When my kids were in school and participating in sports and activities, at the end of the season, my daughter's coaches and the team mother decided to have a potluck. There were fewer than 15 girls on the team, and parents and siblings were also invited. I made approximately 50 biscotti cookies, and my boyfriend prepared 2 pans of baked ziti along with a full crock pot of extra sauce and meatballs. Other items on the table included a frozen dinner, a share-sized package of candy, and 4 different casserole dishes of macaroni and cheese, which seemed to be a staple at Southern gatherings. Everyone believed their dish was the best. Unfortunately, no one brought plates, utensils, or napkins, but we did bring utensils to serve our food. 2 families brought meal deals from a popular fast food restaurant and sat with their own families to eat. Story 81. I worked at a nursing home, and there was a coworker who never wore gloves while performing tasks such as cleaning, giving showers, and brushing teeth. I also rarely saw her wash her hands. I refused to eat any of her food at the potlucks we had. Story 82. I had a friend who would buy a large order of fried chicken and leave it out for a day or two. This would be his lunch for the next few days. I would tell him that it wasn't the best idea, but he would just shrug it off. I wasn't going to push it. He was also the friend I would find with a polished-off bottle or 2 of champagne in the morning after we came off a binge from the bar. We would be absolutely wrecked from hours of drinking, with a tab of $100 to $200 between the 2 of us. I would get home and pass out. When I woke up, I would find him with an empty bottle or 2. It was the wildest stuff I've ever witnessed. I never saw him sick from drinking or 2-day-old fried chicken. Sadly, he passed away the first time someone introduced him to heroin. I guess he truly thought he was indestructible. 27 years old. Rest in peace, Jones. Story 83. A lady I worked with went to a Mexican grocery store and bought chicken wings for the potluck. She put them into a Tupperware and left it out on the table. It looked raw, so when I asked her what it was, she said, "I don't know. The label says prepared chicken, so it's cooked." If you don't know, many grocery stores, especially Mexican ones, will prepare the meats for you. By prepare, they mean season. This lady put out raw, seasoned chicken wings. How she didn't notice the rawness baffles me to this day. Story 84. My teenager had to take something to a potluck. His group was assigned sides. He said, "I'm bringing bread." He brought Italian bread and butter. I also grabbed a macaroni salad just in case. The bread idea was questionable, but I couldn't explain why. We arrived at the event. A particularly annoying mom said, "He can't bring bread." I replied, "Why not? It was his idea, and I brought salad anyway." She was loud and intrusive but not in charge, much like an overly assertive person. When all of the teenagers finished eating, everyone had to deal with the leftovers except my child, who just wiped off his cutting board. Everyone had eaten both loaves of bread, while I was left with my untouched macaroni salad. Some people apparently believe that bread is the worst food. Everyone else thinks it's great. Story 85. I had a Friendsgiving where everyone brought a home-cooked meal. Everything was delicious. Someone made mulled wine, another brought beer that she had personally made, and so on. It was a lovely meal, except for one guy who arrived late. He ran through a fast food restaurant and picked up a 12-pack of hard tacos. By the time he arrived, they were cold, the tortillas were soggy, and the paper they were wrapped in was sticking to them. He didn't even put them on a serving plate. He just opened the box and left it in the middle of the buffet-style counter. The funny part was that there were about 16 of us on the RSVP list, so he knew beforehand that 12 tacos weren't enough. Despite that, at the end of the meal, only 2 tacos were taken, which he and his girlfriend had eaten. He even made a comment like, "Ah man, no one wanted tacos?" And the host shot him a look that could have been fatal. Story 86. 2 things. One time we had a large potluck, a typical Friendsgiving event. About 20 people RSVP'd. This friend group meets almost every weekend, and the Friendsgiving was planned months in advance, around Thanksgiving. One couple brought a small bag of single-serving salad from Walmart and placed it behind the other items on the table before walking away. Others were unpacking and displaying their dishes. This couple left immediately after dinner, taking their unopened, unprepared salad back with them, having helped themselves to all of the well-prepared food from everyone else. On another occasion, that same couple hosted a meat fondue for 8 people. Upon arriving, there was only one oil pot being used instead of the full set of 4 as they had mentioned. After about 5 minutes of waiting for the first dip of bite-sized meat, the host got up, began placing all 5 dishes of raw meat into Ziploc containers, and put them in their refrigerator, exclaiming how great it would be to have leftover meat for stir-fries and lunches for the week. This was just 15 minutes into dinner, and after only one thin slice of raw meat, the rest of us were dumbfounded. We were instructed to slice the meat thinner than sandwich meat and make it bite-sized to cook quickly. I just got up, took one of the containers, and started helping myself. Other couples did the same, commenting about still being hungry. The hosts seemed disappointed that their plan had been foiled and looked upset. Story 87. My friend brought some wild hog meat he had butchered himself. I believe he made burgers out of it, but it was disgusting. We're having a party again soon, and we told him no wild game food. Story 88. I was at a family gathering, and my husband took a big scoop of dip while saying, "Ooh, is this lobster dip?" We often have lobster dip at family events because many of the men are fishermen. My brother-in-law's stepmother interjected while my husband was slowly chewing, "No, it's my holiday dip. It has cream cheese, gelatin, olives, onion, cherries, pickles, and mayonnaise." It was absolutely terrible. How my very honest husband managed to keep a straight face is a total mystery because this dip was an affront to all dips. She definitely just emptied her fridge into a bowl and called it a day. Story 89. There was a potato salad with raisins, which was bad enough. I'm white, but I'll never be that white. Except these weren't raisins. Flies were landing and dying on top of it. The worst part is that people were eating it. Story 90. Baked beans with so much dog hair in them, it was as though the recipe called for 2 cups of the stuff. Absolutely revolting. Story 91. I was helping out at a community potluck Christmas party a number of years ago. I was in the kitchen as I enjoy cooking and was assisting the other 3 people preparing the food. The community members were amazing and brought an incredible variety and large quantities of food for the families attending, and it ended up being around 150 people who showed up for the event. Then, the president of the community league arrived with his trophy wife and his 2 children. He seemed to believe that, as president, he was the main character. He didn't greet anyone but walked straight into the kitchen, looking superior, and handed me a large, overgrown zucchini. It was unprepared and weighed about 4 pounds. You know the type, tough and woody, more suited as a doorstop than food. Remember, there were 150 people there, and he brought one raw, useless zucchini. I looked at him and asked what I was supposed to do with it. He replied in a tone as if he were speaking to the hired help. "How should I know? You're the one doing the cooking." With that, he turned and left the kitchen. I watched him and his family sit at a table in the middle of the community hall, acting like Marlon Brando in The Godfather. He didn't greet anyone, but people approached him to say hello. It was quite surreal to watch. Needless to say, he was not very popular in the community. I was amused by his attitude toward the event, but I set the zucchini down out of the way and got back to helping prepare the rest of the food. As we lined up all the food on the buffet tables, sorted by appetizers, main courses, and desserts, I left an empty space in the center of the main table. Once the greetings by the organizers were done and the president finished making a long, unnecessary speech, essentially congratulating himself for being there, people began to make their way to the food. I then emerged from the kitchen carrying a silver serving platter, part of an old coffee set donated to the hall. On it was the large, whole, untouched zucchini, which I placed in the empty spot on the center table. I stood back to ensure nobody touched it, and if anyone asked, I simply said it was the centerpiece. I wanted to make sure the president didn't touch it when he came by, and let's just say he gave me an evil look, but he couldn't do or say anything. After everyone was well fed, One of the organizers asked everyone to thank our group working in the kitchen and inquired if any of us had something to say. I stepped forward to express my gratitude for all the food everyone had brought. Then, I pointed out the zucchini and remarked that it had been donated by the president. I told everyone what he had said to me in the kitchen, and because of that, I felt it should be the centerpiece of the main buffet table, similar to an ice sculpture. I then stated that since many people at buffets like to take pictures with ice sculptures, everyone was welcome to come up and have their picture taken with our centerpiece, which I dubbed El Presidente. There was silence for a few seconds, then laughter began until almost everyone was enjoying a good laugh. After a couple of minutes, I returned to the kitchen, gathered my things, and exited through the back entrance. From what I was told afterward, a few people did take pictures with the zucchini, and the president attempted to take it back but was warned that if he touched it, he would lose some fingers. It eventually made it into the community newsletter the following month along with other pictures from the event. The president was voted out in the next community league election a few weeks later. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.